HR supply chain, highlighting and showcasing solutions for the most complex challenges facing the industry in 21st century by our team of subject matter experts and mentors. Broadcasting every week, all year round, we will present the most up-to-date series of podcasts and webinars.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bicara Supply Chain, the podcast. This is Nur Hadi, your host, and I'm now with Stephany Lapierre. She's the founder and CEO of Tealbook. This is an enterprise software company focused on buyers and supplier relationship, and she is based in Toronto, Canada. Thank you for joining us, Stephany, and welcome to our show on Bicara Supply Chain.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so before we get in, can you please brief a bit about yourself, your professional background, and what do you do as a Tealbook?
Of course. So I started my career in procurement, probably like most people, not knowing much about procurement or supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
But I built a consulting firm out of Boston many years ago to help large organizations bring more efficiencies within procurement. So bridging the gap between the business and procurement's goals, and trying to reduce a lot of the friction and increase the value of procurement to the business.
Yeah.
And back then, 13, 14 years ago, the change management was quite significant. We're not talking about digitization and technology and agility. And so there's a lot of antiquated processes and ways that people really believed. And so we did that fairly effectively, but then my business started to shift to help hyper-growth companies who were raising a lot of capital, anywhere between $30 and $200 million, to launch their first commercial assets. And so they needed to build a sustainable, scalable supply chain from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And so spent a lot of time educating CFOs and executive team on the upside of procurement, and procurement being done well and early, which increases financial and operational efficiencies. And the pitfall of waiting too long. Post typically longs for once people have said their behaviors, and then had a clean slate in building a procurement function for these hyper-growth companies. And in my experience, and I had this unique lens in working with large multinational Fortune 5,000 companies who had quote-unquote sophisticated procurement function, and the smaller one were scaling really fast. And what I realized is that a lot of the friction that came with procurement as a function was really a side effect of not having access to good quality data easily. There's a lot of data, but the more technology our customers were introduced to try to facilitate different functions across supply chain and procurement, very quickly information would get into silos. It was very difficult to connect the data to have this unified view of who you do business with. Where can we get complete information about the suppliers, and 100% of our suppliers, not 20%. And I found that to be actually impossible, and mostly because the technology back then didn't really allow for data to be extracted in a way that you could leverage it to drive, better quality information.
Yeah.
And so that was the background and what got me into this space. What I noticed 5 years ago is a shift in our market to go. A lot of the software companies were moving to the cloud. And so suddenly it opened the door for the opportunity to be able to start extracting data. And technologies like machine learning, which is still fairly new, was now available to take a lot of that data and start creating patterns and finding ways to mine the data in a way that would be increasingly more useful to whoever's consuming the information. And that's where, I decided to, after 9 years or so of trying to kill this idea that I had in my head, that if we had a different way, if we could move the data to the cloud in a way that the data would continue renewing itself in a way that it would be more useful. But I saw that there was a window for it. So 5 years ago, start putting the pieces together and started building Tealbook.
Wow, this was really awesome. So I wanted to start this conversation by asking a very fundamental question to you on the supplier partnership. What are essential attributes of a strategic supplier partnership?
Well, so I'm just going to take maybe a step back, if you don't mind, because I think it comes back to lack of information. When we talk about supplier partnership, if we don't really know who our suppliers are, what our suppliers do, or information is spread across different, employees or divisions or countries, it's really difficult to leverage your existing supplier base more effectively.
Yeah.
If you could know more of your suppliers, you would find probably opportunities to leverage them for other capabilities that you may not know of because you don't have access to the information.
Yeah.
But I think, having a focus on really truly understanding who your suppliers are, understanding what they do, knowing what, clusters of categories where you may have too many suppliers, frankly, that it's probably not justified to be, collecting and maintaining all this data and paying all these suppliers separately when they do the same thing. And that happens, when we start working with customers and we get their vendor master, we can, in some cases, we could find like 400 recruiting firms, or, we've seen upwards of like 600 market research companies. And we had just a large insurance company who came to us because they had 4,000 marketing suppliers, and they just don't know what these suppliers do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know who's providing value other than just looking at spend data, and it's not a true reflection of who's bringing innovation or who's more valuable and who's not being really leveraged effectively. Mm-hmm. So I think that's having that visibility, that lens is really, really critical. And then having the opportunity to leverage the same information across the organization gives the buyer a lot more insight and understanding the value that supplier be providing to their company or the industry, and be able to tap into those relationships to do things like bringing more innovation to the organization, or find ways, together collectively to maybe generate savings if that's the target. So to me, it comes down to visibility, information, knowledge in order to have, a much better sense and a much better way to be able to interact with your suppliers. The inspiration for Tealbook, the moment where I was like, something needs to be done, was actually at a large Fortune 100 company 13 years ago, sitting there waiting for one of my clients to give me a recommendation of a company that she thought was incredibly innovative and had really differentiated her business. And she spent 10 minutes looking for the business card in a binder. And I remember leaving, because this was a startup. It was a company that was doing something really cool. And I was driving away thinking, and I knew that the chief procurement officer, who I had a meeting with earlier, and the procurement team were trying to consolidate and cut their supply base by 50%. In the meantime, I had someone in a business that loved a company that brought a ton of innovation into her business, and she took 10 minutes to find that business card in a binder. And I thought there's a huge disconnect with the amount of work that organizations do to try to champion small, innovative, diverse businesses. And then mostly, if you're looking at the leadership team and looking at how they're going to make decisions to consolidate their supplier base by 50%, they're going to do it without data. They're going to do it without insight, and that's going to undo a lot of the hard work that teams have done to establish these very special and unique relationships with suppliers that are actually providing value and differentiating the organization.
Yeah. So then why do we need to manage a good relationship with supplier? What do you think?
Well, I think, a lot of the success come from having partnership. And we're not talking about all suppliers. There's suppliers that are commodity based and don't require as much, attention, I'd say. But the suppliers that have a unique lens, they solve problems all the time. They're pushed to innovate because their customers are demanding innovation. And so if you partner with those suppliers who are working with other companies like yours, solving big problem like yours, it's an amazing pool for information and market research and innovation. And so I think, tapping into to them to better understand what you can do to get ahead. And I think in a world today where nobody's really sheltered from disruption, it's more critical than ever to be able to leverage your relationship with suppliers who are doing things every day to invest in their research and development or finding better ways to address some big problems, and learn from them and partner with them and leverage that as talent to differentiate the organization.
All right. So this will be our last question today. Do you have any recommendation? What is the best way to keep supplier be engaged and build a supply chain effectively?
So my answer is going to be incredibly biased.
Okay.
I think you need technology that gives you that turns the light on to your supplier base. You need to know who you do business with, and you need to have that information at scale.
Yeah.
Today, the big part of the problem is that people run to technology as a way to digitize their procurement or supply chain function.
Exactly.
Technology is software and its features. Without data, technology often fails because whoever's consuming information or is using the software in a way the data is not accurate or the data requires a lot of work around, then you're starting to add to processes, you're starting to add friction, and there's just too much information to be able to actually physically, connect it. So I think leveraging technology like machine learning, like big data, natural language processing to make it really easy for people, for employees, that it's procurement, supply chain, or non-procurement supply chain, to be able to access the information and share that information at scale across the organization so that you have more completeness, more insight, you become a lot more predictive, and you're able to share and build that institutional knowledge across the organization so that as a company you become one and you're able to make decisions that are good for the organization and have some consistency instead of today antiquated ways to, buy data and update data manually and cleanse data and look, at data from a spend, not from a forward-thinking approach, and not having the ability to scale that institutional knowledge across the organization. And so I think in today's world, you need to think about your data strategy. You need a data solution, not by buying data, but really making data as part of your foundational piece of technology stack. You should have the same data source feeding all your technologies, the same data source accessed by your people so that they can build relationship, they can be more effective, they can also be more responsive and more value add to the business.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for your time, Stephany. I was really enjoying our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
If you want to find any more information, please reach out again if you have more questions.
Sure. Thank you. See you and goodbye.
At Bichara Supply Chain, we are committed to driving global perspective to embrace technological adaptation in improving process efficiencies. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Bichara Supply Chain. And stay tuned for the latest updates. To learn more, visit our website www.bicharasupplychain.com. Thank you for listening to us. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode.